I want to thank you guys for joining me for this episode of Corona Chronicles Live. We are so happy to have our next guest. Maya is here, and we actually connected through another connection. Howard, I believe, introduced us, and I met Howard through a networking event. And it's just the power of networking. Right now, when we are reinventing ourselves, we're kind of adjusting to this new normal with this global pandemic. It really pays to continue to reach out to people, even if it's virtual. So we're excited to have Maya today. Maya, we're going to have you introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself before we get into our interview.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Lachelle, to be a guest on your podcast. I'm used to being on the other side of the table, so it's nice to be the one getting interviewed as well. I'm a communications and leadership coach. I work primarily, but not only, with female executives who are looking to sharpen their communication skills. That means that it could be women who are founders of businesses or who are executives at multinational corporations. It could be women who run nonprofits. It could be groups as well who are looking for webinars and workshops on these topics that relate to strengthening your communication skills, improving your interpersonal communication skills, and how it all connects into leadership at the end of the day, how you can essentially see your future and do everything you can to bring your best self into it.
I love that. And so, I love the fact that you bring up communication, because many times if you're a business person, a good message with your audience, but how do you determine maybe the message is right, but it could be something with your communication? What are some things that we get wrong that we kind of ignore, but it's really a communication issue?
It's a great question. I think that one of the main things that I see among my clients, and I think that it's a natural tendency for us to have as human beings, is to say something as I want to say it, as opposed to as I want my audience to hear it. And I think that distinction is really, really, really critical. And it's the difference between good communicators and excellent communicators, is the difference between whether or not you have something that you want to say or whether or not you have a message that you want your audience to hear. For example, I used to work with researchers, economists at a think tank, and they were very used to speaking in their economist jargon. They know how to speak to one another. They had taken the same kinds of courses. They go to the same kinds of academic conferences. But I was in the strategic partnership side of the organization, which meant that I was helping the organization raise its money and essentially provide the oxygen to the organization for these researchers to be able to do their jobs. And so people wanted to meet the researchers, but those people were not economists, right? So a lot of my work was essentially being a translation agency with these economists who would be talking a mile an hour about GDP per capita and about all, using all of these big terms, which some of our donors or our partners or people who use the research to do their jobs well could pick up. But otherwise, I would find that people were getting lost trying to remember a term that they heard once in high school, and they missed the whole point of the message, right? And so kind of from a professional perspective, people who kind of say, well, I use the word GDP per capita, and I'd say, yeah, but what's the sweat off your back to just say income per person so that your audience will understand better what you mean? So that's kind of from a professional perspective, but I see it all the time just in interpersonal communications between people. Someone will be really upset about something, and then they'll go to someone and they'll say what they need to say, right? And I'll say, wait a second, what was the point? What were you so preventing, aside for getting out some anger that you had at that person? What did you want to actually happen in the conversation? Were you looking to reconcile? Were you looking to understand each other better? Were you looking to get that person to help you with something or do something for you? So what are the ways that you can think about saying it in their terms in a way that will be easier for them to understand? to ultimately achieve your goal at the end of the day.
I love that because it brings it back to being intentional,
Yeah.
kind of reverse engineering. That's a term that a lot of people use. So I
Exactly.
love that because if you're thinking about the outcome, then, the method that you go about to do it, you can even get yourself out of the equation and be more objective instead of taking everything so personal.
Exactly. I think taking ourselves out of the equation is much easier said than done. And that's why coaching is helpful, right? That's why, because the reason why it's hard for people to take themselves out of the equation could be 100 different reasons, right? And there's not one prescribed method because there are a lot of different reasons why it's not an easy thing for us to do. And so sometimes a group can bring me in and I'll give some kind of a workshop for the whole group. But frankly, the more personalized the work gets, the easier it is for that person to be able to actually see through the changes that they want to be able to make. Sometimes it's about helping that person ask questions instead of making statements, or asking open questions, asking closed questions, being able to say, what do you think? Right? Is like one of my favorite questions to ask people. What do you think? Right? And as a manager, my staff used to come to me and they would say, I don't know, I have so many things on my list and I don't know where to start. Okay, well, what do you think? Right? Give me a guess. Where do you think you should start? Right? Like let's look at your list together, but I want you to give me some kind of a guesstimate of where you should start. And then I'll help point you, if I think that you're in the right direction or the wrong direction. But, at the end of the day, I think people want to feel heard and want to feel valued.
Yeah. I love that. And, what do you think is a great question? Because, when I was dealing with my depression, I wasn't thinking. I was just had this checklist doing that. And it was always statements like what you said. So let's go back to that, because just the fact of asking questions, we get in this loop of I'm not enough. Nobody cares. Woe is me. I have it hard. So talk to us about how we begin to question ourselves and what that really creates for us.
So one thing that I've seen work on me and that I've taken and used as well with others is kind of reversing that back on them. If someone comes and says, I'm such a failure. Like I don't know. I just made a huge mistake and like, I just want to go bury my head in the ground because I'm not even worth talking to right now, and say to the person, all right, if the tables were turned and I came to you and I said, I'm such a failure, I'm the worst, what would you say to me? Or imagine your best friend comes to you with that. What would you say to your best friend? Right? Like, remember that they are their own best friend.
Right. That's good. And I think that's a good place to start because, see, it's just like what it says on the airplane. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first. So when you say we are our own best friend, many of us, we're not good friends to ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't even consider that as an option on the table. I know I didn't.
I think
My
that
checklist.
Absolutely. I think one of the most common symptoms that we see among women in terms of their priority list and the way they perceive their role in the world as mothers, as professionals, as partners, as friends, as parents is I'm last. Right? They might not say it out loud like that, but I'm going to do everything that everyone else needs first. And if there's any time left over, I'll make some time for myself.
Right.
And often no time left if that's how you prioritize, right? It's like there are only 24 hours in the day and it's important to sleep for a significant chunk of them, right? And that actually being able to say, first I'm going to go take care of myself. I woke up this morning and I thought, I really need to do something today that's going to make me feel awesome before I go do anything
Mm.
else. Like
I love that.
It's Monday morning where we see the end of the year coming. And if I
Mhm.
start my day by doing something that makes me feel amazing, then who knows where that energy is going to come from later in the day, right? We have to recharge.
Mhm. 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 So true. I love that. And this is so key because in business owners having this business, having the freedom to do what you want, but then we're not living it. So it's like we're talking about it, but we need to create those opportunities in our so that we can keep that fire burning with that business or whatever it is that we're doing.
Absolutely. I think that for me, one of the hardest, I started my business about a year and a half ago. And one of the hardest things for me was to put time in on my schedule as if I have meetings with someone else scheduled, except that those are meetings with myself and things that I need to take care of. And that I'm not canceling those meetings, just like I wouldn't cancel a meeting with a client because I didn't feel like going to it. Right. I think that ability to prioritize and be disciplined as a business owner and as someone who's independent and being able to say, okay, I'm making my schedule not only for the day but also for the whole week, and I'm thinking about what do I want to achieve by the end of the week.
StreamYard. Okay. Go ahead. I was you're there and I popped out. So go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Not a problem. I was just saying that there's the challenge of, as a business owner, having the discipline to be able to kind of set out a list of things that I'm going to do and then make sure that I get to them. And that one of the things that I think is hard for me, and I know that it's hard for other business owners, is setting aside time on my schedule that's blocked out as if I'm having a meeting with a client, except that client is me. Right. And I would never just cancel a meeting with a client. It. And so why would I cancel a meeting with my number one client?
Yeah.
Because I could go do something else instead. And I think that that's a very, very hard mindset to get into. I haven't quite cracked how to stick to it 100%, but I do think that it's helpful to think about it like that, at least.
I love that, and that's just a practical way that we can block out that time and get used to that, having a boundary. When you have a client, you don't go around telling the people what client you have, what the meeting's about. You honor that privacy. So we begin to honor that privacy for ourselves too. So I think that's a great way for people to implement that. So This is great.
One thing that I often say to clients or in programs where people are writing up SMART goals or making plans, I ask, what could stop you from doing this plan? Right? And having them actually plan out. I had this conversation with someone last week. She said, well, I set aside this time for myself, but if X kind of a meeting comes in, then that meeting I'll give up my own time because that meeting is more important than my time. But if, other kinds of meetings could come up or other kinds of requests from other people can come up, that those aren't going to be things that I'm going to be willing to give up my private time on my schedule for. So I think that that's a good way of being able to think about, okay, what are the things that could stop me? And then how do I plan accordingly? We want to be making realistic goals.
Yeah, I love that because those are the things that, we talk about these goals, but it's like if you don't do the action, how are they going to come to pass? I think people miss that component that we have to work our goals into reality. We talk about, Tony Robbins or Gary Vee and all these different people that motivate us when it comes to business, but we look at what they're doing. They're actively doing the work. They have created this foundation that they're on now. And so we just think, we can say it a couple times, not to say there's not power in affirmations and some of these other things, but it does take an action plan of something that you're doing consistently every day in order for it to manifest.
Yeah. And that action plan is very, very hard to stick to without accountability. I think that the Tony Robbins, the Gary V's, and the gurus of the world these days, they're, like you said, they're great at giving us motivation, but then there's this like vacuum after, right? It's like, well, now what?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of
coaching
comes in. I'm sure that that's something that you've experienced also, is people want
absolutely.
one thing. It happens to me so often that a meeting will start with a client and they'll say, a half hour ago, I did the thing that last week I said I was going to do. So, okay, as long as it's done.
So true. But you know what? If that meeting,
that would be fine also.
But if that meeting didn't happen, that project might not have even gotten done. See, so It's that accountability. It's so true, because I have another business stream that I'm in, but I started out that business with my upline. I said, look, we're going to meet weekly. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I want that accountability for it to stay top of mind, because it's one of many things that I do. So if I didn't do that, then it would be put off to the next week or the next week, because there's nobody that's holding me accountable in that area. So I think
my excuse bucket has a leak at the bottom, and my excuse bucket never fills up.
Yeah. So true. So true. So you've got to find a way to buffer that. And, that's why people say, sometimes you need more than one coach. If I'm working on my business, I might have a business coach. If I'm working on my body, I have a trainer, so there's different areas that, you think about it, you should have tunnel vision and have clarity and focus about what you want to do. And you're able to do that if you set the people in place that can help you with that. If you have a business coach that's going to get with you every week, hey, what's your business doing? Another one, what's your body doing? So these things stay in front of you and help you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah. And, we're in tough times now, and a lot of people feel like they can't afford a coach. Set up a peer coaching thing with a friend, right? Set aside time that once a week you're going to talk for an hour, and each of you gets a half hour of that, right? Where you get to bring up something that's on your mind that you can't, something that you said you were going to do, but you're stuck on, or a disappointing conversation that you can't get out of your mind, or whatever it might be. You take an hour, each person gets a half hour, and do it with a friend. The same way that if you don't have the money to pay for a personal trainer, you have a running buddy. Someone who you say, it's 6 a.m. we're meeting, right? I'm not going to miss that, because I don't want to leave my friend hanging out in the cold at 6 a.m. herself, right?
Right. So true. And I love the fact that you say, yeah, I love that fact of bringing a friend into it, because, that's another thing. We don't really explore how can we afford things. You might have a women's group. Maybe it's 3 or 4 of you guys that get together and say, hey, coach, can you give us some time if all of us come together? You know what I'm saying? So there's so many different ways. If we really, as kids, we would come up with all kinds of solutions. If you wanted something bad enough, you would find every way to negotiate with your parents. But when we get older, we kind of forget that.
Yeah. There's a Jewish saying from the what's the word in English? The sayings of our fathers, Pirkei Avot, it's called in Hebrew. That Rabbi Hillel said, "If I'm not for myself, who will be for me?" Right? That's really the ancient wisdom of ours that says you got to look out for yourself. And I think that he must have been looking out at a group of women when he said that, because certainly, right? A few years ago, Emma Watson quoted it at the UN. She didn't say Rabbi Hillel, but she said, as the ancient texts say, if I'm not for myself, who am I for? She was talking at one of the UN, Commission for the Status of Women days. And it was one of those moments that I thought, absolutely, this is the modern woman's greatest challenge.
Yes, so true. So going back to communication just briefly, because, we've had a lot of times where people are together, close quarters, they're not working outside of the home, they're in the home. What are some tips that you could give for making sure that we're actively listening.
That we're actively listening when we're all stuck at home together.
Right.
I think that one of the most important parts of listening is, or communication skills, the open two-way channel of communication skills is for you to check with the other person that they are available.
I love that.
And if someone's talking at you and you are not available at that moment, I mean, not like in your schedule, but that you're focused on something, to have that rapport with the person to be able to say, I'm just going to finish writing this email and then I'll come over, then I'll leave my nook and I'll come over to your nook, right? Or can we have this conversation? Let's take a coffee break in 20 minutes together. I just need to finish what I'm doing right now, right? That ability, again, to set those boundaries and to then to set that time instead of the without the walls and without the space to be able to kind of have those separations, to say we need to create those doorways, essentially, that we need to be able to I'm closing it just for a few minutes. I need to finish something and then I'll be available for you, right? And then you're showing that person that respect, because then when you are available, right, if you stick to your word and in 20 minutes you come out and say, okay, I'm ready for my coffee break with you now, right? Then you're giving that person 100% of your attention for the time that you have scheduled or set together that's going to work for both of you.
I love that. And that is just so simple, but sometimes we just really miss that whole thing. Now, for people who feel like, there's conflict, what are the best ways to approach those?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question. All I heard was the word conflict. Was there a more specific?
Okay, did we break up?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was saying, when we have those conflicts, those hard conversations that we need to have, what's the best way to approach those when you know that it's going to be conflict?
You know that there's going to be conflict. I think that, again, besides for one of the important things that I learned in my coaching course, a little aha moment that stuck with me, was the difference between giving someone feedback and criticism is asking their permission. I think that making sure that someone is ready for the conversation can sometimes make all the difference between you just showing up and saying, you didn't fold the laundry or you didn't do the dishes when you said you were going to do it, as opposed to, hey, do you have a moment? Can I share something that's on my mind? Right? If that person says sure, and then you say, you've already brought down the tone by even just doing that. You say, you didn't do the dishes. It's like, well, the tone kind of was like, hey, can we talk for a second? The person says sure, and then you say, it really bothered me that you didn't wash the dishes last night when you said you were going to. Could we talk about that? Right? And I think that in general, coming from a place of question asking, right, of being able to say, it upset me that you didn't wash the dishes. I felt like it was not respectful of our relationship. Am I? Do you see where I'm coming from?
Right.
I think that the more we can help the other person understand our perspective and do the work in ourselves, if we discover some kind of a pattern of getting offended by the same kind of thing over and over again, and realize that actually it might be about us, right? Like, I have work to do also, that there's that interpretation of the situation that's causing me to get offended, right? The person really has said something to purposely hurt you, but oftentimes, your son didn't do his homework. He's getting back at me for something. He's like, no, he's not. Why don't you ask him why he didn't do his homework?
Right. And I'm thinking, why is it that we kind of gravitate towards being the victim
Mm.
rather than doing the work to find out what we're really working with? You know what I mean? So it's like your
Mhm.
son just wanted to play video games, but it's about you for his homework. I
Right.
mean, I was stuck there for a long time.
I so I would turn it back to you and say, well, then how did you get unstuck? What worked for you, if you don't mind me
Right.
asking?
Well, for me, it definitely was what I could and couldn't control. So
Mm.
once I realized, you know what, I've already been in fifth grade. Why am I acting like this is me that's taking this class? Let
Yeah,
me see what is getting him stuck and get his feedback because he's going to be doing the work.
right. I think
It was
that
a no-brainer. Yeah.
yeah, I think that often just a little reframing can make all the difference, right? Exactly like you said, I already passed fifth grade, right? It's not whether or not he passes this or fails is not a reflection of my value as a parent or my success as a parent, right? It's about other things
Right.
that have to do with him and our relationship, but that I have work to do also. And I think that these things get layered on top of one another, right? We start to think
Mm-hmm.
about patterns,
Mm-hmm.
right? I see this also with people when they're applying for jobs and
Mm-hmm.
they're getting a lot of the people aren't responding to their cover letters, or they're not getting callbacks from interviews. They string together with the very little amount of information they have. Think about how little information we have sometimes, and we can tell ourselves a whole story
Right.
we have put together from dots that we have connected that might not have anything to do with each other, right? I noticed,
So true.
and it's like, well, why don't you double check that with the other person to find out whether or not your pattern that you've identified is something that you can agree upon is something that's actually happening, or whether or not it's maybe there's something else that you need to be dealing with at that moment that has to do with how you value yourself as a parent and not how your son values you as a parent.
So true. And, we do that with people's highlight reels. You have one picture that might be great lighting, and then it's like, man, she has a perfect life from a pic. We just don't have
Mhm.
any information, but we just
Mhm.
go through this fairy tale mindset and not have any of the other
Yeah.
facts to back that up.
Yeah. And I would
Mhm.
invite our listeners, if they feel that way, if they look at a picture on Instagram, on Facebook, on whatever, and they feel a sense of inadequacy in themselves, to have
Mhm.
an honest conversation with themselves about where that's coming from. Do they need to cut back on their
Right.
use of social media? Do they need to put out some kind of a filter for themselves of some kind of way of,
Right.
shut it off for a little bit, go do some self-care, something that's not
Mhm.
about how you're going to look and how you're going to present yourself, but about how you feel on the inside.
Mhm.
Take a walk, go write in your
Mhm.
journal, go volunteer, do something good for
Yeah.
someone else.
So true. Great points. Well, this is the great topic. I could talk about this all day. But what is the best way for the audience to get a hold of you?
So you can follow. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn, Maya Dolgin, with anyone who wants to connect on LinkedIn. I have BraverMe has a page on Facebook that you can follow, and on
Mhm.
Instagram, I'm at Recovering Perfectionist with 2 T's.
Oh, I love that. Okay. And what final words would you want to say, whether it's dealing with the holidays, Thanksgiving is approaching, or, whatever tip that you want to leave us with today?
I think that many people are going to be experiencing a different kind of a Thanksgiving than they've experienced up until now. It's these holidays with the big family meals. As a member of the Jewish faith, I have experienced this many, many times since the beginning of the pandemic, with Passover and with Rosh Hashanah, and not having the big family meals that we're used to. And I would say that the best thing that I've done is to just take the time to
Mhm.
make a list of the things I'm appreciative for, and
Mhm.
do what I can to make the holidays as festive. Think of it as an opportunity. If you're my age and you are not at a big family meal and it's the first time
Mhm.
you're hosting or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
then use it as an opportunity to think of the family traditions that you want to keep, the things that you want to incorporate into your own adult life, and what are the things that you care less about, and use it as an opportunity to start to design for yourself the traditions you want for your family, and set up a Zoom.
Love that.
I already set up a Zoom Thanksgiving with all the clients anyway, so we'll have a check-in with everyone in the morning anyway on Thursday.
So great advice. So we want to thank you guys for joining us today. I hope you were taking notes. I was doing my part to take some over here on the side because those were some great tips. And this segment was sponsored by the International Women of the World. This is the new book, The South Stories of Motivation by Extraordinary Women. And it's a book that's raising funds for women in Morocco for entrepreneurship. So we want to give that shout out there. But thanks so much for your insight, and have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. And we appreciate you spending time to share with us today.
You too, Lachelle. Have a wonderful
guys. Well, there you go. All right. And we'll see you guys the next time. You guys, thanks for joining us. Okay. Have a great day.
Happy Thanksgiving.